This isn't a workout, this is a war. But this war didn't start in a gym. It started in the quiet devastation of an empty house, where the absence of one person made the whole world feel impossibly large and unbearably silent. It started when Eleanor realized that losing the love of your life doesn't just break your heart. It breaks everything you thought you knew about who you are. For 52 years, their lives were a single story. John was her world, her constant, her home. When he was gone, Eleanor wasn't just heartbroken. She was lost in the sudden, deafening silence. The silence he left behind was the heaviest thing she had ever been forced to carry. But let me tell you what 52 years really means. It means knowing someone's breathing pattern so well that you wake up when it changes. It means having conversations without words, finishing each other's sentences, and sharing inside jokes that no one else understands. It means building a life so intertwined that you forget where you end and they begin. Eleanor had been John's wife for longer than she had been anything else. She was the Eleanor who knew he took his coffee black, but preferred tea when he was stressed. She was the Eleanor who could tell by the sound of his key in the lock whether he'd had a good day or a difficult one. She was the Eleanor who had memorized the way he laughed at his own jokes and the way he hummed unconsciously when he was content. When John died suddenly on a Tuesday morning, a morning that had started exactly like 18,979 other mornings before it, Eleanor didn't just lose her husband. She lost her identity, her purpose, her reason for getting up in the morning. She lost the person who had witnessed her entire adult life, who remembered her stories, who cared about her dreams. The house they had shared became a museum of their life together. Every object held a memory. Every room echoed with conversations they would never finish. The coffee maker that automatically brewed for two. The thermostat set to the temperature that had been their compromise for decades. The answering machine message that still said John and Eleanor in both their voices. Grief became the air she breathed, a poison seeping into every corner of her life. Simple memories became ghosts that haunted the hallways. She was fading, adrift in a world that had lost its color, crushed under the invisible weight of a life without him. People don't tell you that grief is physical. They don't tell you that it makes your bones ache and your chest feel like it's being crushed by an invisible weight. They don't tell you that it steals your appetite, disrupts your sleep, and makes your hands shake for no reason. Eleanor's body, which had carried her through 7 decades of life, began to rebel against the constant stress of loss. She stopped eating regular meals because cooking for one felt like an admission that he was really gone. She stopped sleeping through the night because dreams were either too cruel in their false hope or too empty in their reflection of her reality. She stopped taking care of herself because what was the point of maintaining a body when the life it was meant to live had ended? Friends called with good intentions, but their voices sounded like they were coming from another planet. Her daughter visited, bringing casseroles and concern, but Eleanor felt like she was watching their interactions through thick glass. Well-meaning people offered advice. He would want you to be happy. You need to get back out there. It's time to start living again. As if grief operated on a schedule, as if love could be filed away once it became inconvenient. The world moved forward while Eleanor remained frozen. Bills piled up unopened. The garden John had tended withered. The garage where he had spent countless hours tinkering with projects remained untouched, as if preserving it exactly as he left it could somehow preserve him too. Eleanor began to disappear, not just from the world, but from herself. She caught glimpses of herself in mirrors and didn't recognize the hollow-eyed stranger staring back. Her clothes hung loose on a frame that was shrinking daily. Her voice, unused for long stretches, became hoarse and unfamiliar when she finally spoke. She was dying slowly, and she knew it. Not from any disease that could be diagnosed or treated, but from the gradual erosion of hope, purpose, and the will to continue when the person who had made life worth living was gone. Then one day, in the dusty silence of the garage, she decided to fight back. Not against the memory of John, but against the crushing stillness. She found his old weights, and in the cold, unforgiving iron she found an enemy she could finally push against. The searing pain in her muscles was a welcome fire, a feeling that proved she was still alive. The decision didn't come with fanfare or sudden inspiration. Eleanor had been wandering through the house like a ghost, touching objects that held memories but offered no comfort, when she found herself standing before the garage door that hadn't been opened since the day John died. Something, call it desperation, call it survival instinct, call it love, refusing to surrender, made her turn the handle. John had been religious about his morning workouts. Even in his 70s, he had maintained the discipline of lifting weights, doing push-ups, staying strong. Eleanor had always teased him about his dedication to what she called his torture chamber, but secretly she had admired his commitment to taking care of himself, to being strong for both of them. Now, looking at the equipment covered in dust and spider webs, she saw something different than memories. She saw a challenge. She saw resistance that wouldn't offer sympathy or platitudes. She saw weights that would demand effort, demand presence, demand that she inhabit her body fully instead of floating through life like a specter. The first time she tried to lift the empty barbell, her muscles screamed in protest. Her hands, soft from months of inactivity, immediately began to blister. Her back, weakened by poor posture and neglect, ached with the unfamiliar demand. But for the first time in months she felt something other than numbness. Pain, yes, but also accomplishment. Challenge, but also choice. She began showing up to the garage every morning, not because she had to, but because she chose to. Some days she could barely lift the empty bar. Other days she managed to add a small weight to each side. Progress was measured in pounds and repetitions, concrete numbers that couldn't be argued with or diminished by well-meaning relatives. The weights didn't care about her grief. They didn't offer empty consolations or suggest she should be getting over it by now. They simply existed, waiting for her to decide whether she was strong enough to move them. And slowly, gradually, she began to prove that she was. But then something unexpected began to happen. The goal was no longer just to numb the pain or fill the hours. As the weeks turned into months, she discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving the day. She was building a new one from the ground up. What had started as a desperate attempt to feel something, anything, transformed into something Eleanor hadn't expected: hope. Not the hope that John would somehow return, or that the pain would disappear, but hope that she could build a life that honored both who she had been with him and who she might become without him. Her body began to change first. The stooped shoulders that had carried the weight of grief began to straighten. The shaking hands grew steady and the legs that had felt uncertain beneath her found strength and balance. She started sleeping better, eating more regularly, moving through the world with purpose instead of just going through the motions. But the physical changes were nothing compared to what was happening in her mind and heart. Each successful lift became proof that she was capable of more than she had believed. Each workout became a conversation with John, sharing her struggles and victories with someone who had always believed in her strength even when she couldn't see it herself. Eleanor began to understand that grief and growth weren't opposites. They could coexist. She could miss John desperately while still finding reasons to be excited about tomorrow. She could honor their 52 years together while still creating new experiences that were entirely her own. She could carry his love forward while building the strength to love herself. The garage, once John's domain, became Eleanor's sanctuary. She researched proper form, learned about nutrition, set goals that had nothing to do with the past and everything to do with the future she was choosing to build. She joined online communities of people her age who were also discovering that strength training could be transformative at any stage of life. For the first time since John's death, Eleanor had something to talk about when her daughter called. She had progress to report, achievements to share, plans to discuss. The future, which had seemed impossible to imagine, began to take shape again. Not the future she had planned with John, but a future that acknowledged his influence while refusing to be limited by his absence. She wasn't just lifting weights anymore. She was lifting the suffocating blanket of grief that had pinned her down. With every challenging rep, with every roar of effort, she was forging a new future. She proved to herself that even after the deepest loss imaginable, a new, powerful foundation of strength can be built. The day Eleanor deadlifted her body weight for the first time, she understood that something fundamental had shifted. The woman who had entered the garage months earlier, broken and convinced her best days were behind her, had been replaced by someone she was still getting to know. Someone stronger, more resilient, more confident in her ability to handle whatever life might bring. The weight on the bar wasn't just iron and steel. It was every sleepless night she had endured, every morning she had forced herself out of bed, every moment she had chosen to continue when giving up would have been easier. It was the weight of starting over at 73, of rebuilding an identity that had been shattered, of learning to live with love that had nowhere to go except deeper into her own heart. Each repetition became a declaration. I am still here. I am still growing. I am still capable of change. The roar that escaped her lips as she completed her most challenging sets wasn't just physical exertion. It was the sound of someone who had found her voice again, someone who refused to be diminished by loss. Eleanor realized that strength training had taught her something profound about resilience. Just as muscles grow stronger by being challenged and allowed to recover, the human spirit can emerge from trauma more capable than before. The grief hadn't made her weak. It had revealed reserves of strength she never knew she possessed. She began helping other widows in her community, sharing not just her story, but her practical knowledge about fitness, nutrition, and the power of physical challenges to rebuild mental and emotional fortitude. The garage that had once been a place of solitary struggle became a gathering place for women who were learning that their stories weren't over, that their strength wasn't gone, that their futures weren't limited by their losses. She never erased the past or the love she held for him. She just finally became strong enough to carry it with her. Eleanor's morning routine now included 2 rituals: a moment of gratitude for John and the life they had shared, followed by a workout that prepared her for whatever the day might bring. His coffee mug still sat in its place, but now it was a comfort rather than a torment. His side of the bed remained his, but she no longer reached for him with desperate hope. Instead, she carried the warmth of his memory as she moved confidently through her days. The love they had shared for 52 years hadn't disappeared with his death. It had transformed from something that required his presence to something that lived within her, a source of strength rather than sorrow. She talked to him during her workouts, sharing her victories and frustrations, feeling his pride in her accomplishments and his encouragement during her struggles. Eleanor understood now that honoring John's memory didn't mean preserving their life exactly as it had been. It meant living with the courage and determination he had always seen in her, becoming the strong, independent woman he had always known she could be. She was carrying their love forward, not by staying frozen in the past, but by building a future worthy of the foundation they had created together. The woman who had once been defined entirely by her relationship to another person had discovered that she was complete in herself. Not because John was forgotten or his importance diminished, but because their love had been strong enough to teach her how to love herself. Strength is found in the places we least expect it. In the decision to fight back against despair. In the choice to believe that our stories aren't over when we thought they were ending. In the discovery that we can carry love forward not as a burden, but as fuel for whatever comes next. In the understanding that the deepest grief and the greatest growth can coexist, can even depend on each other. Eleanor's store,